Hey folks, welcome, good evening. I'm just waiting for a few more folks to sign in. Thank you for joining us. Okay, folks, well, I have 6 o'clock, so I think we'll go ahead and get started. Thank you for joining us this evening, and welcome to Riverology with Robin Dunbar from ODU. I'm Teresa Augustin, and I'll be your moderator this evening. I just want to give a quick shout out to Steel for sponsoring all of our free programming associated with the Washed Ashore art exhibit that we have currently on display at the garden. If you haven't been out to see that, please swing by. It's got a wonderful environmental message, and our programming today complements that. Just a few housekeeping notes. We will keep you on mute. If you have any questions, please use the chat feature, which is at the bottom of your screen. You can just type that in, and I will keep an eye on that, and I will present those questions to Robin as we go along when we have breaks for questioning. And we are recording this presentation so we can share that with you guys later this week. Again, I thank you for joining us, and Robin, thank you for being our presenter. And I'm going to stop sharing, and Robin, you are welcome to now share your screen.
Wonderful. Can you see it?
No, not yet.
Okay. Let me back up. Let's see. Can you see now?
Sure can.
Okay. And can you see my notes at the bottom? Did they disappear?
They did disappear. It's just your slide deck.
Okay, thank you. Well, again, thanks for inviting me today and having interest in my research. It is called Riverology, Promoting Stewardship of Rivers Through Youth Participation in Science and Art. I have always lived in the watershed of the Elizabeth River that runs through Norfolk, Portsmouth, Chesapeake, and Virginia Beach. And for the last 20 years, I've worked as the Deputy Director of Education for the Elizabeth River Project. And so I'm responsible for teaching youth, and I'm going to share you some of my platforms that I use to do that. But at the same time at working at the Elizabeth River Project, I have recently completed a master's thesis, and I'll be moving into my doctoral thesis in the next month. So this particular master's was a Master of Arts in Humanities, which with a new degree called Cultural and Human Geography. So my whole career has been the marriage of art and science, and I felt really fortunate to be able to pursue my master's with ODU. So here is a map of the Elizabeth River. And as you can see, can you see my arrow, by the way? My cursor moving around? Okay, so as you can see, the Elizabeth River looks very much like a tree limb with several branches. So we also have a branch up here, which is called the Lafayette River Branch. That's near ODU. But a lot of folks often misinterpret this branch as its own river because it's called the Lafayette River. But actually, this is a branch of the Elizabeth. It's really called Tanner's Creek. But in order to get funding to build a bridge, it had to have the word river in it. So it switched over to be the Lafayette River at one point. Over here, we have the Western Branch, mainly residential. That goes into Portsmouth. Then we have over here, this is the eastern branch and ends in Kempsville. That's also near like Military Circle area, Indian River, Broad Creek. And then we have the southern branch, which has been our most polluted over time. And that goes into Great Bridge, Chesapeake, with the intracoastal waterway actually serving as a highway. So if a vessel comes anywhere from around the world, comes into the Atlantic Ocean, through the Chesapeake Bay, down the mouth all the way of the Elizabeth River, and through the intracoastal waterway, you can end up in Florida. So we are very much a highway for a lot of traffic. Now, the Elizabeth River is a living and a working river. So that's important to know a lot about our home river right there. So if you were to take a view of the Elizabeth, a snapshot aerial, you'd see a lot of industry, a lot of cranes and storage containers. You'd also see a port, naval bases, the ferries and all sorts of barges going up and down the river. But we are also very much alive with lots of different types of river animals and wildlife. Now, we have a history, unfortunately, meaning the Elizabeth River, of some industrial accidents that happened around the 1950s. And so we had actually an explosion of a creosote factory, which caused a lot of toxins that are highly carcinogenic, ending up on the land and sinking to the bottom. We've always kind of referred to that creosote as goo, and we've had a slogan saying the goo is going. But over time, EPA cleaned up the uplands, and the Elizabeth River Project, the nonprofit developed in the 1990s, has been working really diligently to get rid of the goo off the bottom. And they're in the last phase now, which is near Money Point on the southern branch, of getting rid of that goo. Already species have returned. It's much healthier. They've put in oyster restoration also, in a living shoreline with beautiful native plants, but they do still have one final cleanup of the bottom. Now, overall, the Elizabeth River has a grade of a C overall, but every area of the Elizabeth River has a different grade. So if you're not familiar with the health grade of bodies of water, the Chesapeake Bay has a scorecard that comes out every few years, along with most rivers. So the Elizabeth River works with scientists and local organizations, state and federal, regional, and these scientists look at the water quality and the data and assign grades. So right now, Broad Creek has a D, and some of these other branches mainly have C's. The mouth of the river near the Norfolk Naval Base has a B. So if you go out the mouth of the Elizabeth River and you hang a left, you're going to hit more the Nansemond and the Suffolk area. And then if you hit the right, you're going to hit Deep Creek, Lynnhaven River, the Bay, and then the ocean. Now, unfortunately, the Elizabeth River, specifically in Norfolk and Portsmouth, has the highest sea level rise on the east coast of the United States. Now, we are second in the nation to New Orleans. So basically, a lot of Norfolk built on top of the river. So when it rains, it just naturally comes back. That's just the way nature works. So unfortunately, we also have other issues of land subsiding, sinking. So as the land sinks and the water comes in, we're just going to continue to experience lots of flooding. Now, we also have, unfortunately, what's called sunny day flooding, meaning it can be beautiful weather, no rain, and just with the tides coming in, we'll experience flooding now. Now, my whole thesis and focus has been combining what we're seeing right now with an increase in litter that we see. So geography is key to that, meaning that there needs to be a connection for everyone, all ages, to what is the name of my local river, where is it, how is it connected, what cities does it run through. So a little bit of a difference. Lynnhaven River, they are mainly residential, and they have a different focus and a different audience, and they run through one city. where Elizabeth River, that focuses on 4 cities, and it's mainly industrial with a little bit of residential. So, you know, you've got key audiences that are a little bit different, of course, still with the same focus to clean up this river. Now, these photos all come from my research. I took them, and you can see this is what I'm seeing daily. There's been a lot of questions on how many facial masks I've been seeing, and I always do at least see a dozen in each cleanup, but mainly what you're going to see in any river right now as far as marine debris is you're going to see floating on the top or by the shorelines a lot of food containers. Now, my other focus is being able to share this story. And as a scientist, it's really important that we learn how to communicate what we're learning and what we want others to learn. So scientists sometimes know their data and they know their research, but they need to be able to share that story so that it's a narrative and repeatable by others. And so I've worked a lot on combining all kinds of stories for all different ages to learn about my research and what I do. Now, of course, litter is being seen by many of us right now. It's increasing, is in plain sight, and the trash travels via stormwater drains into the river. Now, if you didn't know, all the storm drains lead directly into the Elizabeth River in our watershed. There's nothing that stops it or filters it. So if you've got something that goes down your storm drain from your yard, from your driveway, anywhere from soap from washing your car to fertilizers and pesticides you're using on your lawn to things on your street, or if you take and sweep your lawn clippings into the storm drain, that goes directly, especially during hard rains, into the river. Now, 60 to 80% of the trash in Earth's oceans comes from behavior on the land, and then the rest comes from boats and fishing. Now, the litter we see every day demonstrates how much plastic we're using. And so there are others that focus on the micro or the water quality or the chemistry of the river. My focus is on what you can see. So to let you know, the 2020 data collected by volunteers in Virginia continually shows the top 10 lists being dominated by food and beverage related containers. Now, most of it is made of plastic, and you can see cigarette butts is still number 1. But then there's the food wrappers, those beverage bottles, the cans, the grocery bags, all these single-use, one-time container items. Always see a lot of things that are light and things that can float. And some of these things are easier to clean up than others, and some of them harm our aquatic animals and our birds more than others. Now, we have made some progress on policies. Just to let you know, Styrofoam is going to be phased out now over the next 4 years. So you're going to see less and less of that at your local restaurants. They'll be substituting something else other than Styrofoam. It's also now illegal to litter mass balloon releases. So there are fines for that. And so we have made progress. Now, on the Elizabeth River, I have not been seeing the amount of balloons that they see at the beach. So the Lynn Haven River focuses a lot on the balloons, so does the Eastern Shore. It has a lot to do with venues of weddings and events and where they're held. But just to let you know, these balloons travel also through different airways. And from the Eastern Shore, any event that's over there usually ends up on the Chesapeake Bay front in Virginia Beach. But we are making a lot of strides, and the Virginia Aquarium and others have made a lot of progress with that. Local governments now do have an authority to place fees on single-use plastic bags. Some places have had it successful, some not. So there's a lot of focus and talk of this, but there's also a lot of controversy on plastic bags and whether to continue them or not. Now, we have a population in Virginia of 8.5 million. It generates about 4 million per year with a litter tax, and that's about $20 per year is paid from businesses through groceries and beverages. And the litter tax funds, though, are insufficient to how much it costs for prevention and removal. So that I can tell you, I could take 100 volunteers and work a couple of hours just at Harbor Park of one places. And it's a large piece of land. There's a lot of places litter accumulates there. And that's just one little tiny piece in the Elizabeth River watershed. And there's just so many other issues. So it takes a lot to clean up such a river running through 4 cities. But laws and policies are only a part of the solution. It really boils down to our daily choices and our decisions. So using reusable coffee mugs and water bottles, and taking and helping with cleanup efforts, all education, all this adds up. Now, these are some pictures taken at one of the sites I've been monitoring at ODU. This is the typical pile that I'll see that has washed ashore. So anywhere from straws to a lot of these single-use plastic bags that contain things like chips and candy. I also usually see pieces of styrofoam broken up. A lot of that is just the wave action that breaks it up. There's also usually tons of bottle caps and the plastic cigarette filters that go on cigarettes. Now, this right here I want to show you is erosion caused by just the waves coming in, and that's in the same spot, just a few feet down from where this trash was. So what would help is if these hardened shorelines had beautiful, lush wetlands that help with erosion and help filter and capture a lot of the litter and debris. So we're working really hard on that. Now, one thing I've also been doing during my research is I've been communicating with our local rehabbers, those that rescue and receive the calls about animals that they find that are endangered, hurt, or dead. And the #1 deadliest item is fishing gear. Now, I learned this through my research because I just didn't hear a lot of people talking about it. Unless you talk to local rehabbers, you might not know that fishing line is getting stuck in areas where people fish and they toss their line out, and a lot of times if trees are around or power lines, it'll get caught and then it just breaks and it hangs. Birds are not equipped to avoid clear fishing line. This was an owl that was not too long ago stuck in a fishing line that was hanging from a power line. They were able to rescue this owl, but it was extremely dehydrated and stressed out. But this was a success story. But again, they just don't have built into them to avoid it. And especially for those that hunt at night, they can't see it. And it is causing quite a problem. And just to let you know, it took calling many people, many professionals. Dominion Virginia Power came, boaters, just to try to get to the fishing line stuck on this power line. So that's the other problem, is it's not easily removable. So it's one area that more education is needed and some alternatives. Often here you see a bird where they're surgically trying to remove fishing line that actually got around the bird's beak fishing and just closed the mouth up along with a fishing hook. So these are things that happen all the time with our local rehabbers. About a month ago, when I talked to the rehabbers, they said they could not keep up with the calls on the injured birds, bats, owls, and waterfowl that are being injured by local litter. So more education is needed for that. In the background here, this is one of my platforms of education with the Elizabeth River Project. It's called the Learning Barge. It's docked in Norfolk. It is America's greenest vessel. It's off the grid, runs by solar panels and wind turbines. And we have composting toilets and live wetlands, and kids come aboard and learn about the river. But again, my focus, although it has been the Elizabeth River for 20 years now, I have been going back to school. I recently earned for mentoring the Presidential Award from the White House, and I am a National Geographic educator. And with that, I'm going to show you how all of this led to the research that I recently completed. My research is called Riverology, and it has two parts. And part of that was developing a 10-lesson inquiry-based riverology curriculum for teachers to use in their classrooms. And then what I did was I took one of the 10 lessons and I piloted with a local school. Now, it didn't begin that way. When you're working on a thesis, you develop a committee of professors, and I originally wanted to just monitor 5 sites and be able to report about what kind of litter I'm seeing, because we don't have a benchmark right now in the Elizabeth River of how much we have and what are the main sources and what, tell me more about what we're seeing. And that's what I really wanted to focus on. But with my background and my career and my skill base, they really wanted me to first start out my master's with developing this riverology curriculum and educating teachers, and then focus on my doctorate more with creating that benchmark. So hopefully I'll be able to come back and tell you more about the data metrics with what I find. But this is kind of where it all began. Now, I'm looking at different questions related to my thesis, and the questions that I'm looking for are why we should even teach youth about rivers. Why is that important? And since my marriage of my whole career has been a marriage of art and science, I wanted to look at how art and stories serve as a good communication tool for students. I also wanted to include visualization activities and how they can be utilized with youth in their rivers. And then I also want you to understand that children and youth have barriers right now that they're facing to actually participate in helping clean up this problem that we're having with our local river. Now, our rivers are polluted, and this is one reason why it is so important. And kids need mentors. It's very important for adults to be mentoring to the kids to not only build their confidence and knowledge, but also to help them cross over those barriers so they can help too. I've always done inquiry-based activities with the Elizabeth River Project, and I've always done that because the inquiry, asking questions with youth, it leads to action and stewardship. I've also always included art and visualization to help teach science. And this time I've included story maps in this curriculum, which I'll share a little bit with you about that, and drawings. So students drawing, specifically my target audience was 2nd grade. Drawing is known to be the best form of communication for 2nd graders. That's the way they are most comfortable and best communicate. So as I taught them about their home river with my thesis, they were telling me what they were thinking through visualization and drawing. Now, I had to get this particular project approved because I had an audience of 2nd grade students and youth. This was all during COVID. I feel fortunate that ODU approved me still working during COVID with youth, but I had to do it virtually. I worked with 18 students that were in a private school, and I was not allowed to collect their names. And of course, I had to get permission from their parents and the students to participate in this research. And what we did is throughout the activity to measure what they learned, before we started, I'd ask them a question. They'd draw what they were thinking before I taught them anything. And then at the end, they did the same question again with a drawing. So I was hoping to measure the difference between what they were thinking before versus what they were thinking after. So I used pre and post drawings. Now, I wanted to promote stewardship of rivers through the youth participation in this science and art. And it's mainly a focus on mentoring the children to help reduce the marine debris and litter in their home river or your local river. And again, that was implementing 1 of 10 inquiry-based lessons. And I was trying to empower their voice increase their geoliteracy, meaning their geography knowledge, and then their spatial thinking, meaning when they thought about the river, it took on a broader, accurate view of what the river really looks like. The methods I used, I did about 6 months of a literature review from other scholars. I did a archival map research where I looked up all kinds of, through archival libraries for Elizabeth River maps. That was really fun. And then I did sample 5 sites for marine debris of unique items to share with the kids, things I was finding. And then again, I analyzed the kids' drawings before and after each lesson. Now, I really wanted to focus on inquiry. And again, here's a good example of a picture that's typical if you were to go and look in the mudflats of the Elizabeth River. You'd see a tire during low tide. You'd see it covered with barnacles. So if I were to share that image with children, you know, what would they think of that? Would they think that the tire is a habitat? Would they think that that's litter? Would they think that they have the empowerment to help remove that tire? There was, you know, could we tell a story that the Elizabeth River is tired and use that as a pun? So I wanted to include a lot of visuals and photos and see exactly how second graders interpret that. So teaching them about it with inquiry, I wanted to ask lots of questions. I wanted them to be able to actually examine marine debris, things that I'm finding, and see what they think. You know, I wanted to know if they were going to say, hey, where did this come from? How's it getting in the river? What can we do about it? Why is it there? And I wanted the kids to have time to think. If kids have time to think, they can come up with big ideas, and it can shift from a why not attitude to a how can attitude. Now, again, children at second grade communicate best through drawings. So drawing closely resembles thought to children. It's their way of putting thinking in action. It's a great way for them also to record their ideas and go back to what they were thinking as they continue to learn. It is an underused method in science. There are some science teachers that are doing it, but it's rare. And so the teacher that I worked with, she was great at including it, but we were both really surprised that at the beginning the kids didn't know they were going to be able to draw, and you would think they just won the lottery when we said you guys get to draw. They were so excited. So it's a great way to express ideas to adults, and there is also research that shows, though, that it's important once the kids draw their drawing that you give them time to explain it, because if not, the way I interpret something in their drawing might not be accurate. So here's a good example of that. So here you've got a picture that this is considered a pre-drawing. This was a drawing that they did, and they showed the river and they showed trees, and there are these black circles all around the river. So for me to interpret that, I might say, are those bushes? Are they rocks? Are they animals? Are they marine debris? So depending on that can skew my research. So it's important for you to be able to not give the child help in explaining it, but ask them or prompt them with questions that says something like, could you tell me about your drawing? Could you tell me a little bit about the things you drew around the river? Things like that. So you're not really giving them an answer of what you think it might be, but instead letting them tell you what they drew. Now, also, I included time at the very beginning for the children to close their eyes. I wanted them to be able to just be quiet and concentrate on images that are coming to their mind. Now, I don't know, and from my research, I have not found any activities that are inquiry-based, science and art-based, where you start by having the kids pause, close their eyes, and give them time to think. So this was new, and there is an opportunity that it can be confusing for the kids unless you start out in a certain way. So if you ask kids to be quiet, sometimes they think that that is they're being told to be quiet because they're being too noisy. But this was more of be quiet, let's just pause, let's take time to think, and let's close your eyes. It's a time they can flesh out their ideas, they can step away from those computers and be mindful and creative. Now, there are barriers for youth to participate in helping clean up the river, but there's also a really large audience around the Elizabeth River watershed, right? So there's 500,000 people that live around the Elizabeth River watershed, with a huge portion of that being children. So barriers, though, for them to participate are things, for instance, we may be teaching children that you can do this in the future. When you get older, this is what we want you to know. This is what, we're preparing you for. But if we can involve them now with real challenges that our rivers are having, we can find ways to mentor and to help them cross that barrier, have a voice, and participate. I do it all the time with cleanups now with kids and with stewardship actions. And they're very capable, and they actually really love helping. So we need opportunities to share. We need opportunities for adults to have the youth be interested in sharing their voice, and have them invited around the table. Now, with the archival map research, I want to let you know that I can share a lot of the Elizabeth River maps with you. I have a site called riverology.org, and that links you to this curriculum that also has map resources. But here's a good example of 2 maps of the Elizabeth River that kids can get the maps out, and they can see differences in the way we used to draw maps and the way that we draw them now. It's real important to give the kids confidence and share maps. First of all, they absolutely love maps. I'm sure that Teresa with Norfolk Botanical Gardens can attest to the kids probably love receiving maps when they come to the gardens, to be able to find things and walk through. They love maps when they go to amusement parks and natural parks. But also this gives them a bird's eye view of the shape, the actual spatial thinking piece of the river. So I'm going to show you what 2nd graders were thinking in a few minutes and what they thought after seeing maps. Now, with my marine debris samples, out of everything, what I really wanted them to learn the most about was styrofoam. This piece of styrofoam over on the right of the screen is huge. It was the size of a chair. And it floated up one day in my neighborhood. I live on the western branch of the Elizabeth River. And what I did was I took a chunk of that off and I broke it into pieces, and you can see close up that it turns into these little beads. These little pellets of styrofoam break down very easily with wave action, and our wildlife, our fish, eat them. And so it just goes right down the food chain. The other thing that I provided for the kids is I gave them all a plastic bottle, and I had them put the pellets of styrofoam in the bottle so that they could see that it floats on the surface. And then we talked about the animals that would eat it if it was floating on the surface. The other thing I did was I gave them all a little fish bead that was dense and metal that they could turn into a necklace, and I placed that also in their bottle, and it's on the bottom of the bottle, so they could tell the difference of things that sink to the bottom, which are lots of other kinds of debris like crab pots and derelict vessels and things we can't see, and then there's the things that we can see floating on the surface. Now, here's an example of this draw and explain analysis. And as you can see, let me get there. As you can see here, at the top is the pre-drawing. This is both the same child. This was before she learned anything and after. And you can see in her original view of what do I know about my home river? There were no branches in the river. and there were just a few trees, and the river was moving. And I thought, oh, that's really brilliant. After she viewed maps, after she learned that the river was void of wetlands, after she learned that more trees were needed, her post drawing included marine debris, it included branches, and it also included all these beautiful wetlands and baby sapling trees. So I was so proud that just from this particular inquiry exercise, you could see and measure the difference from the pre and the post drawing. Now, this curriculum again is called Riverology, and we'll, as soon as probably the next month when ODU publishes this, I'll be sharing it with the local teachers. And each of these lessons follows 6 steps. You start with an inquiry question. There's a visualization activity where the kids close their eyes and think. They then draw what they're thinking about that question. They share their drawing. They learn stewardship that can help, and then they reflect on what they learned. Although the Elizabeth River is used as the model throughout all this curriculum, it's very easy to substitute somebody else's river in its place. I did model this particular kind of inquiry-based curriculum after National Geo's inquiry, but it is quite different. It was reviewed by geography professors at ODU. And there are 2 modalities that I use. So if you're a teacher, one, the teachers learn to create a web-based story map, and it's through Arcgis. It's user-friendly, really fun. The kids loved it. And then the students learn science with art and drawing their story. Now, here is a difference between the process I came up with, Riverology, and National Geographic's. So my particular process, it's based mainly with students of all ages, where geo inquiry is mainly with middle and high school students. I also have this visualization where they close their eyes. National Geo doesn't do that, but National Geo is still a great activity. It's just different. The students with Riverology, they do the drawings and create a picture of what they were thinking, where in National Geographic, they conduct research and they create storyboards. The kids in Riverology share their drawings, where the students in National Geographic, they have dialogues with their teachers and discuss how to present a presentation about what they learned. The Riverology students are learning stewardships to help a river, and it's very river-centric, where the geo inquiry could be an activity about anything about the environment, and they create posters. And then the reflection is in Riverology what they learned, where geo inquiry is more of an assessment. Now there's 10 activities again in the Riverology, and all the questions starting with lesson 1 end up with lesson 10 asking about the river's future. So it begins with what does Earth look like in the blue planet, to what does your local river look like, what's a bird's eye view, we're really bringing in maps, what's on the bottom of the river, how did the pollution get there, what does the river look like after a storm, what does sea level rise look like, what do the river plants and animals look like, and what does a river superhero look like, and then that river of the future. So my research, I took and implemented lesson 2, what do you know about your river? I worked with Christopher Academy in Portsmouth with 18 second graders. That was all their second graders. They were all in class. There was an even distribution of 7 and 8-year-olds, although there were 13 boys and 5 girls. I performed it in April, and again, they did those drawings after viewing a story map. And then I was mainly looking at the drawings to see what percentage included marine debris, what included stewardship actions, and then how many changed their view of the river after looking at maps. Did it include branches? So this is kind of a look at what inside the curriculum looks like. It's broken into those 6 steps, and teachers, all they have to do is follow each of these 6 steps all the way down. Also in following this, it tells you exactly how to develop a story map, and it gives you templates of how to measure each of the pre-drawings. So you do the pre-drawings, and then on this side, the post-drawings. So for instance, if I had all the drawings from the 18 students, each of those would have this template attached to it, and I'd go through and answer these questions. In the drawing, was the river depicted as polluted with marine debris? Yes or no? In the post drawing, the same thing. And then I could compare each of the drawings that way and measure the results. Now, this is what a story map looks like. And after the presentation, I can show you the link. But again, it's done through Esri, which is spelled out E-S-R-I, and Arcgis. It's a really great way for teachers to create a story lesson, and you just pull it up on your smart board. And mine is called the Elizabeth River. It talks about it being a working river and a living river, and it goes through a series of images of maps, and the students saw pictures of adults and youth cleaning up the river and working together. So story maps is the way that I included the teachers teaching. Now, here's some of the drawings of the 18 students that I wanted to kind of share with you, and just to kind of show you what kind of results that you perhaps would see. So again, the question was, what do you know about your home river? Without them knowing anything, on the top row is what they were drawing. So you can see the typical picture where half of it's water with a sun and a bird. This picture I thought was pretty cool. It showed a river with some green area beside on both sides. And I thought this was really cool. This actually was a bridge with some trees. And this was the only one that included buildings. Out of the 18 students, only one person drew a bridge and buildings. On the post, after they watched that story map presentation and they learned about marine debris being in the river and that it was polluted, one of the children drew hope. And I know that because I gave her time to explain, but she included a rainbow and wildflowers and wetlands. One student you can see here showed an animal now in marine debris where they didn't know the river was polluted before. And here you see a different view of the river now. You see streets because they learned that a lot comes down the streets with runoff. You see now the added wetland area. You see big, tall trees. So it's really interesting to learn through drawings their story. Now here on the top row, once again, you can see what they were thinking before they realized that the river was polluted. None of them in the 18 drawings drew anything about pollution in their pre-drawing, but they drew animals and trees. I had a couple draw branches, which I thought was really advanced, but most of them drew a river that was just straight. Here, though, you can see after viewing maps, look at the branches. Look how they included wetlands. Look how they started to include marine debris in the river. So it was all you just didn't know exactly how it was all going to turn out, but I was really happy with that. Now, this was an interesting student right here. This last two drawings, this was the pre and the post. This particular student, so if you can't see my arrows, went all the way to the right. He was the only one that drew people. Now, of course, this is palm tree, so he had probably seen a river, or not an island, of course, but maybe he had visited or on a vacation or seen some type of water where there were palm trees and there were people with coconuts, right? And he drew that. But after the students also learned about stewardship and what we can do, he was the only one that drew people, but the people cleaning the river were animated minion characters, cartoon characters. So out of all the 18 students, none of them drew people helping clean the river, even after seeing images of people and children doing stewardship. So that's going to require more research. I don't know why they didn't include themselves and people, but I have some assumptions. Here again, here's some pre-drawings where you can see, whoops, let me go back there. You can see before their view and then after. Now this far right one, this was another good example of why you need explanation. So here I'm saying, okay, I really could not begin to know exactly what this blob is over in the right-hand corner. It could be a ship, it could be an animal, a whale, I'm not sure. So when this child explained it to me, this was a ship, and this shows a healthy river bottom. After learning the river was polluted, I don't get any ships, and I get a polluted, muddy bottom now. And this down here is debris that is sunk to the bottom. And it shows the river is chaotic. It's not balanced. So again, that requires a child explaining that to you. Here again, you can see no pollution, animals, blue and green. Here, you see a recycling bin now. You see another recycling bin over here, and here's another image of hope, which I had no idea in a second grade's mind that hope would be rainbows. I thought that was really cool. There were two students that did that, and they weren't sitting near each other. But you also see this is a mixture now of signs educating about don't pollute. You've got some marine debris, some animals, and some trash around the river too. So this is how the second graders think and learn. Now, this one in the middle was one that I was kind of stunned by. This I thought was brilliant. This first pre-drawing, when asked, what do you know about your river? I was just amazed that they drew this pre-drawing with all the arteries and the creeks and tributaries coming off a river. I thought, wow, that second grader is advanced. But I was shocked to see the post drawing that the student drew. What I did was I had the students draw use the same sheet of paper for the pre and the post. They couldn't put their name on it, but I knew that the same student had the same pre and the same post because they use the same sheet of paper. When I turned it over and saw this, I really wasn't sure what I was seeing. And so I needed consultation on this with professors, which assumed we're not positive, but this could have been an emotional response to learning that the river is polluted. So here you've got a river that's orderly, it's flowing, it has all its parts. Here you have a river that is now out of balance, in chaos, and not functioning. And they're not happy that it's not healthy. That was new knowledge to this student that it was polluted. So this here could possibly have been an emotional response. Now, once all the drawings were done, I then started measuring them with percentages. And from there, my results again showed that none of the participants' pre-drawings included marine debris or stewardship actions. But after they learned about the river, they saw maps and they saw visuals. 83% of the post drawings then included the marine debris and the stewardship actions. But of course, the actions were like the recycling bins, the wetlands were there, the baby trees were there, but it didn't show people. So also 11% of the pre-drawings had a mental map of the river with branches, but after seeing those maps, more of the students included what the river actually looked like with branches. Oh, and then of course, none of the pre and post included people. Now, challenges through this and what I would do different. Assumptions were made that none of the children had a lot of river knowledge prior. Before, with a lot of materials that went home to the parents and the teachers, they were asked, please don't educate the students before they participate in the research. So I did have to assume they didn't, and it appeared that they really didn't know. There could be misinterpretation with this research again, unless you give the students time to explain their drawings. And I'm unsure if COVID and the isolation with schools this past year, if that played a role at all. Curriculum does also need to be piloted live and with other ages other than the second grade. So my conclusions is this is a great curriculum that nicely complements science classroom instructions. Students' drawings can be analyzed to learn things, and that the students loved drawing and they didn't struggle, and nobody complained about the opportunity to draw. Prior to the storytelling, the students envisioned the river as healthy with plants and animals. And after the storytelling, though, they started to include marine debris, solutions, and hope. Many of the students drew a mental map of the river with those branches, and one student may have had an emotional response. And most of all, scientists can serve as mentors and share their research in different ways. Now, this is a picture of me recently during Clean the Bay Day. Again, this is the amount of pollution and litter that we collected over 1 hour. I guess it was June 6th or 7th, Clean the Bay Day. I led a litter cleanup at Knitting Mill Creek. It's near the Lafayette Zoo and Collie Avenue and ODU. It's kind of right in the middle, 42nd Street. Here, what I did was let's see, there were about 30 land and volunteers in kayaks, and they would all bring in their bags, and then I'd sort and I'd count. So you can see there's glass bottles. These are all those plastic containers. There still were some cans. Here's a pile of masks starting over here, straws, random items that included a birdhouse, a bottle of soap. I always get balls, tire rims, things like this. The other thing that I always hear, though, is the adults are always saying, I had no idea. I had no idea that there was this much styrofoam, that there were these many straws. And again, this was just one tiny area with about 30 volunteers, and there's so much more that needs to be done to keep up with all the litter management. So I know my time's up. I want to thank you guys for allowing me to share a little bit in riverology. This is my ODU email and my website, again, riverology.org. And I'd love to entertain any questions if you have any. And if not, I just want to thank you for coming today. And I hope that you will learn more about how you can help keep our local rivers healthy and free of litter. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Robin. I found that to be incredibly interesting, especially seeing how kids interpret, with drawings after you talk to them and teach them a little bit. That is just incredibly fascinating to me. And thank you for, planting the seed in our next generation of stewards. I don't see any questions. I think everything, was, well explained and good visuals and all that good stuff. I wanted to ask a question. You mentioned that localities have the permission to charge 5 cents for plastic bags. Do you know of any local cities that are doing that?
Right. So that if you go to Clean Virginia Waterways, run out of Longwood University, and Lynn Haven River Now, they are both working with a Virginia Marine reduction pollution plan, along with NOAA, and they're working with policies such as those taxes. And right now it is talk. So we're in that stage of trying to figure that out. And that policy is being implemented in other areas of Virginia. So if you want to keep up with all the local policies that are going on, I would recommend going to the Clean Virginia Waterways with Longwood University, and they can give you the latest and greatest on all those policies. But I can tell you right now, the best thing to do is to bring your own bags when you go shopping until we learn more about how that's going to progress in our local area.
Great. Well, thank you, Robin, and thank you for taking the time to do this presentation and support our programming at the garden. And thank everybody for joining us this evening, and hope you all have a good rest of your evening and a good work week. Thank you all so much.
Thank you.
Good night, everybody. Thank you.
Good night.